Recording in progress.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Ian Scott, President and CEO of the Beaufort Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'm here with Richard Tunstall from Market Analysis and Research. We've been very honored to have Richard working with us at the Chamber this year on updates to our Regional Prosperity Dashboard. The whole point of tracking our progress as a region is knowing what trajectory we're on, where we're headed, where we need to make course corrections. And the detailed presentation that we have today gets a little bit further into the weeds on just how the Beaufort region's performing. We did an abbreviated version of this presentation 2 weeks ago at our Regional Economic Forecast event. Thank you to those of you who were able to join us in person at that event. This is the longer version where we go into a little bit more detail on several of the key data points. We are recording this presentation to share with folks after the fact. With that, I'll hand it over to my esteemed colleague, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for joining us. As Ian mentioned, this is more of an extension of what we presented a couple of weeks ago. We're still going to be looking at the 4 major topics in terms of population, income and earnings, age and education, and a look at the labor force.
Just 1 second.
Okay, so by way of a reminder, the geography that we're using here are 4 census county subdivisions as defined by the Department of Commerce. And these 4, going from northwest to southeast, Yemassee, Sheldon, Beaufort and Port Royal, and St. Helena, basically form the Chamber's focus of interest and represent, or a good representation of the labor shed that we're dealing with here. As you said, I apologize in advance. It's a little bit of repetition from what we did a couple of weeks ago. So within the data that we're going to talk about here, there are 3 areas I think that I would like to concentrate on in the way that the previous presentation was extended. The first one is to provide a little bit more data in those 4 areas. So how they are more spatially distributed with the use of a lot more maps. Being a geographer by profession, that's something that's very dear to my heart. And then finally, to try and answer the question of what data, the question that Ian has asked me is, so what? What can we do with it, and what does it mean? Okay, so if we start off looking at population. Okay, we started looking at population and household growth, and we're looking from 2010 to 2025. The 2010 census, we, as the 4 subdivision region, 74,300 persons. By 2021, that estimate was up to 500. That represents an average annual growth rate of about 0.7, 0.8% a year, which is right in line with national averages. That growth is anticipated to increase in rate, and by 2026 to increase to around about 85,000 people, which is just under 5,000 extra. That represents 1.1% annually, which again, the national growth rate is still expected to stay around about 0.8%. So as the growth increases, I think it's important to put that into some sort of context. It's increased growth, but it's manageable. If we look at the area south of the Broad River and the balance of Beaufort County, the forecast growth rate there is over 2.2%. For the Charleston Metro, it's 1.8%. Greenville's about 1.7%. We're growing about the same rate as the Savannah Metro, I'd say that 1.1%. So it's healthy growth, and one that I say we should be able to manage. Spatially, we can see the dark green are the areas of higher population. These are actual raw numbers of population, it's not population density. So the map is a little bit subjective in relation to the size of the census blocks that we've been using. But we can see the dark areas and the higher population areas within our region are concentrated on St. Helena Island, which, sorry, the point I should have made, that includes Ladies Island in that subdivision. And we can see the density of population there. And then the areas coming down along the Broad River around Shell Point and into Beaufort on Highway 21. One thing that the map does illustrate well is the population densities outside of our region within the county, which we'll come on to again when we start looking at a bit more growth. If we look at it by subdivision, the Beaufort Port Royal subdivision is the most populous of the four. Again, in the bars, the aqua is the 2010 census, the dark blue is 2021 estimate, and the grey is where we see that going into 2026. It's followed by St. Helena, and between those two, of the 80, the 75, 80,000 people, that's about 75, 80% of the population. Sheldon and Yenisei are much more sparsely populated. If we look at that in terms of percent, we have South Carolina, again from the aqua is 2010 to 2021, and the dark blue is the forecast growth rate. South Carolina as a state expecting to grow 1.3%. We in our region just below that. The highest rate of growth is on St. Helena, again reflective of Ladies Island and the impact there. Sheldon and Yenisei, the graphs are a little bit misleading. They're basically flat, around about 0.5% either way. But we can see that the growth rates have improved and increased within those subdivisions as well, as we've gone through the last 4 or 5 years. If we look at where the growth is going to occur, again, just off the bat, I would point out that the higher rates of growth, that's the dark red, basically outside of our area. Within our area, again, the areas around Shell Point along the Broad River, into Beaufort proper, and over onto Ladies Island, with much more modest growth being shown in Sheldon and Yenisei. Where are these people coming from? We take all those numbers, we have a net in-migration in 2019 of around about 1,200, 1,300 people. We are getting people to move here basically from out of state. Within state, more people are leaving the county than coming in from counties from other states. But across the country, people have found Beaufort. There is basically a pattern that shows it's from the East Coast, with a huge gap of immigrants from the Midwest and the mountain states, and then it picks up again in California. In the last 5 years, we've had something between 500 and 600 people estimated that have moved in from Los Angeles County. There's also movers from abroad at 900. In terms of race and ethnicity, the graph on the left is showing race, and generally the United States is depicted on the far left in the aqua. In the blue is South Carolina in the middle, and on the right the graph is a Beaufort region. Compared to national and state averages, we have a fewer concentration of white population. We're around about 61%, the country is 69%, and I believe the state is around about 64%. But much higher proportion of Black and African American. It's about 12%, 13% in the country at large. We're close to 28, 29%. In fact, around about 30%, in the States about 28, 29. So correspondingly, we are less well represented in the other racial counts that the census looks at, which are basically American Indian, Asian Pacific Islander, and other multiracial. The graph on the left, which is well marked for easy interpretation, that's in fact a Hispanic population. And again, just a reminder that Hispanic is an ethnicity, not a race. You can have black and white Hispanics. In the United States, we're about 18% Hispanic. In the Beaufort region, we are around about 12, we're less than 8%, about 7.5%. Again, a little bit ahead of South Carolina. But in terms of diversity, in terms of race and ethnicity, I think it's probably fair to say that our diversity is very binary. Again, looking at this geographically a little, the graph on the left is percent Black African American population, where we see Sheldon and Yemassee with 60 to 65, 70% of the population being African American, and down in Beaufort region and St. Helena, that's much in the 30 to 40% range. And if we look at the graph on the right, which is the percent white, it's a mirror image. You have a majority of white population in Beaufort, Port Royal, and St. Helena. So having established what the numbers look like in the race, how do we fare in terms of income and earnings? We look at per capita income and median household income first. Per capita income is on the left, the percent at the period of the census 2010, the estimate of 2021, and the forecast for 2026. And if we concentrate on per capita income just for a minute, per capita income is just below 30,000. That's about $6,000 less than the national average. It's in line with state. And the median household income, the discrepancy is a little less. It's 58,000, and the national average is around about 67,000. We're not seeing that gap in either per capita or median household income narrow that much as we go out to 2026. And as we go through the presentation, I think we can see that that's very much a result or a reflection of the age, education, and labor force profiles that we have. Just as we look at this by region, and the Beaufort region as a whole, the median household income of 58,000. If we go south of the Broad and the balance of Beaufort County, that median household income jumps up to over $70,000, 70 to 75. So again, we're quite a long way behind the incomes that are reported primarily in Bluffton and Hilton Head. Within our region, St. Helena is the closest to the national average at 67,000. Sheldon and Yemassee, reflecting again their more rural nature, are much lower at 40,000 and 41,000 respectively. Household income a little bit more spatially by block group. And again, we can see that outside our area, the outline in black, is far more dark green, higher income than within. Within our area and within the subdivisions, the high and medium income are concentrated along the coast, around and also again on Ladies Island. And I believe the dark green group of block groups in the middle is Data, and then along by Shell Point and down by the Broad River. It's a bit more starkly revealed if we change the variable slightly, and instead of looking at median household income, look at average household income, and look at those block groups that have average household incomes of 100,000 plus. And the reason for the switch from median to average, I confess, is pure laziness on my part. It's much easier for me to get this data by average household income than median. But if we look at over 100,000, there are no, the darker oranges, those block groups where average household income is over $150,000 a year. And we have none block group averages within our region. Where we do have over 100, they reflect the median household income in some ways, the area around Ladies Island, Data, and parts of Port Royal. In terms of age and education, again, this can't be considered without understanding where our incomes are and the impact that this has on our incomes. If we look at our age distribution in 2021, we have, let's explain the graph. The yellow line is our index to South Carolina, capturing South Carolina age. And the light blue line is South Carolina age cohorts, and the dark blue is the Beaufort region. And we can see two spikes here. One spike from really the 20 to 24-year-olds, from 19 to 24-year-olds, and one spike of the 75 pluses. The younger age profile, I think, spikes is a direct result of the military influence here. And the older spike is a direct result of people like me moving into the area and increasing the age. But what it does, importantly for our economy, is it takes away, we are underrepresented in the critical wage earning years of 25 to 65. Many reasons for that could be that can be attributed to such factors as the high cost of housing, the opportunity for labour to keep people when they leave here for school and go to college and they don't come back. But that's certainly an issue that we should probably address. Look at our median age. The median age for our region is 42 years old. The national average is 38, so we are slightly older. We are babies compared to the balance of Beaufort County. The balance of Beaufort County has a median age of 55. Our age, overall median age, is kept low, in my opinion, by the presence of the military. Look out to 2026. I think the key line, part of the line here for me is the index to South Carolina in the 75 pluses. In 2021, we were about 20% higher in this age cohort. By the time we get to 2026, that's going to be closer to 60% higher than the balance of the state. Education, very little to say here. We're bang on the national average in 2021, which is the central blue lines in there for the whole region. For people aged 25 plus who had a college degree or a graduate professional degree, represented about 31% of our population. National average is 33. And at the other end of the spectrum, people with a high school diploma or less constituted around about 38% of our region compared to 37% nationally. Again, we can look at the geographic spread within our college plus education attainment and see it follows very similar lines to income and to race and almost to age, with the Beaufort region being pretty close to the state average, St. Helena Census Division having the highest percentage of higher educated people, around about 40%. I think what's interesting to me about that graph is across the entire region and state from 2010 to 2021, light blue line, every region showed a lot of gains in the percentage of college educated residents. Between 2021 and 2026, at the best, that's expected to be flat. You can take all the individual demographic variables and look at income, look at population, etc. What it becomes difficult, I think, is when we try and get together what they mean when considered cohesively and as a unit. So I want to introduce something that I've been using for many years called Mosaic classification system. I've heard these called psychographic systems. I've heard them called demographic segmentation. But what they do is companies will take a ton of census data and mix it with credit data from companies like Experian and Visa, and then compare that to omnibus surveys and credit card purchase habits, with the idea of clustering together similar groups of demographic people and analysing their similarities in purchasing habits, travel habits, readership habits, and media habits. Without getting too much into the weeds, Mosaic distribution classifies 19 broad groups. We further rate it down to about 70 odd different types. Here in Beaufort, the blue line, the aqua line, if you like, represents the percent of each Mosaic group within our region. And the blue blocks represent how that compares to the national incidence from there, the orange flat line being the national incidence of 100. And if we mix the numbers of Mosaic households along with their relative penetration, I think there are 4 groups that stand out. There's booming with confidence, there's promising families, the big one is pastoral pride, and the final one is singles and starters. And without going into detail on all of these, but if we take booming with confidence to give you some flavor of what that means, the booming with confidence group, characterized by generally an slightly older age group, just younger than the baby boomers, but quite a lot of millennials going into there, generally aged over 35, 40, not big with young families, but a lot of them do have adult children living with them. Dual learners, college educated. They are high on travel, particularly international travel, or at least pre-COVID, and politically very active. And they generally are very aspirational in their purchasing habits, and big users of the internet. If we go to the other extreme, if you like, pastoral pride, it is far more rural, as the name would suggest. Again, an older age profile with few children, tend to be much less educated, have large homes, but not very high value, large homes in terms of acreage, bungalows, older homes, and they are quite mobile. Their purchasing habits are very much reflected in the fact that they are more rural and have less opportunities around. Disposable incomes do tend to be less. And if we look at how those 4 dominant Mosaic groups are across our region and our area, the orange are the pastoral pride, the lighter green are the booming with confidence, and the olive green more with promising families. I think one of the interesting things here is the singles and starters are very much incorporated in the military areas. See where that green areas have been coming around the Air Force Base and also around Paris Island. But for much of our area, we are in that pastoral pride group, and this is a Mosaic profile that we would hope to see change a little bit, I would suggest, as we go through the next 10 years. And finally, labour and employment. The daytime population, private jobs, total primary jobs within the region, the total number of jobs stood at about 12,500 in 2019. And it's a fairly equal mix of people who come into the region to go to work, about 10,300, and then people who leave for work outside the region, about 13,000. And I would suggest that an in-region labour force efficiency of 49% is in fact fairly healthy. Okay, so our labour force characteristics. The civilian labour force is in the light blue, employment is in the dark blue, and the unemployment rate is the yellow line. We're looking here from a period 2010 to 2021. And we can see as we emerge from the last recession in 2008, 2009, our unemployment rate fell to, I think that's about just over 3% in 2018. I think it dropped around 2.6% in 2019. And then the spike came with COVID. Slowly getting back now to the unemployment rate, that's down to about 4%. The last unemployment rate I saw was in the mid-3s for Beaufort County. And we're looking at a civilian labor force that in 2021 was standing around about 78,000, 78,300, which is higher than it was in 2018, pre-pandemic. And we're looking at an employment base of over 74,000, again, which was higher than pre-pandemic totals. The reason I think this is important is, I don't know if those of you who are at the economic forecast, when the labour force participation rate was discussed, there was a lot of discussion about what was called sideliners, or people who had left the workforce during the pandemic and still hadn't come back. And nationally, we were probably about 6 million jobs shy still from pre-pandemic levels. That is very regionally sensitive. And if we look at where we are in Beaufort County, the number of sideliners, as we pull the dots together, don't appear to be as great as we might wish. If we look on the graph on our left, that is labour force participation rate in South Carolina and the United States. South Carolina being on the lower line, the light blue. And we can see that even since 2015, the labour force participation rate has been significantly below the US levels. But interestingly enough, it wasn't affected as badly during COVID as the United States was overall, which seems to indicate that less people left the workforce here than nationally. And if we look at Beaufort County, where I can only get data up to 2019 and look at labour force participation, we were up in 2019 at levels significantly above South Carolina's rate. And again, that would indicate to me that we are not performing the vacancy signs we see and the held wanted signs we see along Bay Street all the time might have been there had COVID happened or not. And we can look at the unemployment rates here as well and look at how we stack up against some of the coastal counties in South Carolina. The graph on the left is showing South Carolina graph being the gray graph that seems to be a little bit more volatile. Charleston County is the dark blue line at the bottom, and Beaufort County is the line in the middle, which both show our unemployment rates spiked with COVID, with Beaufort County faring a little better than either Horror County, which is Myrtle Beach, and Charleston County. And that protection, if you like, from unemployment, again, is probably got a lot to do with the military. And if we look at the more recent unemployment rates by those counties, Beaufort County in December 20 had an unemployment rate of just under 5%. By now it's down to under 3% in December 2021, which is equivalent to Charleston County, but faring better than Horry County, certainly. But Horry County, if my memory serves, is one of the worst hit counties by the pandemic in the country, and South Carolina as a whole. If we look at where we are working, this is looking by the National Classification of Industries sector. Again, it's a classification that's undertaken by the Bureau of Labour Statistics. And we can see that 80% of our employment is in two sectors, the service sector and retail trade. And I would put to you that those two sectors are not the highest paid sectors in the world to work in. And within the service sector, hospitality is a big one at 34%, and education is another big one percentage-wise. But if we compare our service employment again to the US average, see that we are concentrated very much in three service areas: arts, entertainment and recreation, hospitality, and other. Other is a real catch-all and really takes in just about every repair facility that you can imagine, from auto repairs, janitorial work. If it doesn't fit, if a service job doesn't fit into any of those other categories, that's where the other goes. But I can see that the higher paid service sectors in professional and tech, management and enterprise, we are underrepresented by national standards, and hospitality, arts and entertainment are not, again, the highest paid sectors in the world. The other part of our employment puzzle is obviously the military. Here in the region, we have 7,500 people deployed in the armed services, and that's 10.5% of our total regional employment. Nationally, the percentage of people employed by the military is 0.5%. So it clearly has a very outweighed influence on who we are. That's particularly true in the Beaufort Port Royal subdivision, with 6,900 of those military employment living there. So all the employment can be reflected in our average weekly earnings. Again, the yellow line is the national average. The dark blue is South Carolina. The lighter blue aqua is Beaufort County. And across the board, our average weekly earnings are below national averages, with the exception of leisure and hospitality, which unfortunately is one of the lower paid weekly earners, period, across the country. So we've put on the data sources that we used to get this. Just like to summarize by saying that this is a very descriptive look at a region. It's a very descriptive look at the geographies within the region and then how we fit in not only to the rest of the state and the county, but also the country. And it remains a descriptive look until we can turn those numbers into something more analytic. Moving them to more analytical purposes can be as simple as, and in my world, which is retail, it can be as simple as how many people do we need in the region for Target to decide they want to open a second store in the county. And then it becomes more complicated. If the number of people are there, what are the demographic characteristics that people want? How do we translate that demography into retail expenditure potential? How do we take that retail expenditure potential and look into market shares and sales forecasting? And we can use that type of framework across the board, be it in industrial location, what's our labor skill set? We can look at it in terms of what do we need to change to attract the type of industries we want, and generally use it as one leg of a stool, if you like, to promote the region and to develop actionable strategies to make those things happen. And with that,
Richard, thank you. Staying on for the moment on data sources, one question I know that's been asked and will be scrutinized, the projections on population growth. And I know we've been complicated by delays in release of data from the Census Bureau.
Sure.
Could you talk a little bit about the analytics that went into projecting a 5-year growth forecast on population side?
Okay. It's a mix. First, just to address the 2021 and 2026 estimates that we are using are based on American Community Survey information. The 2020 census at this level, at the lower levels of geography, is not due to be released. Well, they're saying sometime later this month, but I'll kind of believe it when we see it. To mitigate that, the American Community Survey is an annual survey of 3.5 million people that's conducted by the Census Bureau and is used to develop local geography estimates of a whole range of demographic characteristics, population, income, race, all the things that we've been looking at here. And they produce 5-year estimates up to 2021. The demographic vendor that I use, ScanUS, and on the sources over the Applied Geographic Solutions, they are responsible for taking that data and then taking broad county level data that the Census Bureau releases as projections and modeling it down to low level. And again, without getting in the weeds, they do this almost on a monthly basis, and it's mainly based on the United States Postal Service counts and delivery addresses. They take for the raw counts and model the characteristics from it. I would be surprised if when the 2020 census is released, that we will see too much variance from these numbers that we come through.
So one of the big objectives that the Chamber's laid out and is supported by many organizations in the community is economic diversification. Yeah. Changing the composition of our total employment by growing, in particular, technology, manufacturing, and healthcare job opportunities that tend to pay above the state's current median wage average. To what extent are aspirations in those areas or achievements in those fields reflected at all in this data yet? Or what data points might we look for to see in the future if we're making genuine progress?
I think the data that we have presented here is merely, and there are all sorts of variables that we have not even touched upon here that are going to impact the success of the Chamber and the Economic Development Department in attracting those companies. Not least of which is changing the age profile that we have here, or encouraging people to come back to provide the jobs there, and that's linked in with all sorts of things like housing costs, affordability, and things that we don't really measure. The data, or haven't measured here, the data here can be used to measure some forms of success and to set some reasonable goals. If we're expecting to see, our age profile in the 25 to 29-year-old suddenly increase by 50% in the next 5 years, is that realistic? And so it's kind of a manage your expectations here.
For me, observing the data and listening to the presentation, the impact of the armed services really jumps out. I think in every section, their influence was visible. One of our chief goals regionally is to present more family sustaining wage job opportunities for separating service members to see an opportunity here in this local community. The question in there is, do you think we have an opportunity to be successful in that endeavor? Could that be one of the best strategies to increase that prime working age population, which to me, that was one of the more glaring slides. We have them at age 20 through 24, and then again after age 65, but missing those prime working age adults that are really the fuel of the economy.
Yeah, sure, I do. And this is more of an opinion than a data-driven deal. But if you just look around, and the amount of people who are retired here, who have come back, who were once military, there's a very strong ex-military representation that is indicating that people like the area. One of the challenges in making the transition from being a service member into the local community and the goal of increasing digital jobs, technology jobs in the community as a whole and higher paying jobs is to marry the educational attainments of the people that are going through Paris Island, and particularly in the Marines, who are sometimes signing up at 18 without college educations, and matching those to the employment needs of the jobs. And again, I'll always come back to housing costs. I think that's a really, really big issue.
Another slide that jumped out to me, because it frankly was a little different than what I expected based on the earnings, that our education attainment is actually right at the national average. Any suspicion about why there's such an imbalance between where we sit nationally ranked on higher education attainment compared to wages?
No, again, I think it comes back to that percentage of 33%. If you take 33% of our civilian labour force of 70,000, it's still a fairly small number. And if you're looking at some of the areas that you might aspire to, or some of the more urban areas, for example. And, you know, I'm not drawing a direct analogy here by any means, but if you were to take Midtown in Atlanta, the percentage of the 25 plus population with college degrees there is in the 65 to 70% range. So the national average is one of those numbers that that hides a lot of sins.
We have a moment to take questions from the audience. If there's anybody online live that has a question, we welcome them now. Hearing none, I'll remind everybody watching this either live or recorded that this is not a one-time deal for the Beaufort Regional Chamber. This is an update that of a study that we commissioned first last year, and we are committed to continuing to update, to refine, and to strengthen as a tool for setting strategic direction for our organization, but also sharing the data across our region to help others in elected positions and in other leadership roles around the community to make the most informed decisions possible as we're setting policy for the region. Your notes on housing in the commentary after are well taken. It's certainly a priority for us, and one that I hear from employers across the spectrum. Attainable housing for jobs that we have and the jobs we aspire to attract is one of our biggest challenges. I think it's one we share with a lot of other coastal communities. But for those watching, I want you to know this is something we take seriously, and we'll continue revisiting and drawing information from throughout the year. Richard, in closing, any big overarching thoughts that you might leave us with, having spent the amount of time you have analyzing this region?
Apart from that, I think the growth we have here is really good. It's really manageable, and the opportunities we have to develop the area are there for all to see. I think, good or bad, I think in 10 years, Beaufort and this Beaufort region will be very different in the demographic makeup than we see today.
We'll leave it there. I want to add again my thanks to Richard Tunstall for his work to help analyze our region. Richard's a current class member of the Leadership Beaufort class and is already doing masterful leadership for us here in the region. Thank you very much. Thank you, those of you who are with us today. Thanks to my colleague Megan for running the technology and getting us set up. And thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.